Within the world of shonen, there are plenty of incredible characters out there, yet even still there is one protagonist who most definitely stands out to me, and that is Tanjiro Kamado from Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba. He doesn't start off as predominantly strong nor naturally gifted, and instead we get to see his transformation into a talented swordsman throughout the series. Not to mention he also has substantial character growth. With that being said, let's jump into the history of Tanjiro Kamado. Now, first and foremost, when it comes to the various characters of Demon Slayer, there tend to be references within their character names. And so let's take a look at the kanji in Tanjiro's name. His first name Tanjiro has the kanji for charcoal, to heal, as well as son or male, which also happens to contain a common masculine name suffix. When it comes to his surname, the first kanji translates to a Japanese wood and or charcoal furnace. The second means door. However, it could also be a reference to the exorcism of demons. But now getting into his backstory, Tanjiro lived a rather quiet life on a mountain. He comes from a family of coal miners. Tanjiro lived on the mountain with his younger siblings, mother, and ailing father. Being the eldest, Tanjiro went on to adopt a mature fatherly figure role for his siblings. An early example being how Tanjiro got his forehead scar. The incident occurred when one of his brothers, presumably Takeo, spilled a hot kettle. Tanjiro, being who he is, jumped at the chance to protect his brother, resulting in his forehead scar. This isn't a big scene by any means, but it does show that even early on, Tanjiro was protective of others, especially his family. Perhaps the influence of his father is what made Tanjiro who he is today. His father being the one to teach him the Hinokami Kagura dance, which was passed down like a relic in their family. And alongside it, Tanjiro receives his iconic Hanafuda earrings. Despite his illness, Tanjiro's father is able to perform the ritual dance, something he even performs in the bitter cold. In fact, one time, Tanjiro asked his father how he was able to keep his stamina up, and his father replied that there are breathing techniques that allow a person to dance longer. What was in fact the application of one of the most fundamental Demon Slayer techniques, although his father definitely was not a Demon Slayer. Eventually, Tanjiro's father fell too ill to continue the dance, leaving Tanjiro to take up the tradition. From learning the dance, Tanjiro also learned how to empty his mind, and that allowed him to access a see-through world. Tanjiro sees his state firsthand from his father. Shortly before his illness took him, Tanjiro's father faced off against a bear. The sight of this massive predator was enough for Tanjiro to be frightened. However, his father quickly dispatched the creature upon entering the see-through world. And this scene in Tanjiro's childhood seems to mimic events later on. The bear was impossibly large and looming, but was still ended by his father's axe. If anything, like the Hinokami Kagura dance, this is foreshadowing for what was yet to come. But soon after this occurrence, Tanjiro's father passed on. Tanjiro continued to live a modest life with his family and took coal into town to sell. But one morning changed his life forever. On this particular day, Tanjiro prepared to take coal into town, and on account of being the resident coal seller and having done many trips into town before, Tanjiro was recognized. The townsfolk even asked Tanjiro to help out with their errands, and he eagerly did so, exemplifying just how helpful Tanjiro has always been. But now, after he was done with those errands and charcoal selling, Tanjiro began to make his way home. However, he was stopped by one man in particular, Old Man Saburo. Saburo insisted that Tanjiro stayed at his home for the night and recounted the dangers of the mountainside. One such danger that he mentioned happened to be demons, something that Tanjiro brushed off at the time. Regardless, Tanjiro stayed at Saburo's house for the night. Eventually, morning came and Tanjiro headed out back to his home. Yet the site he returned to was most definitely an unsavory one. Here, instead of being greeted by his happy family, Tanjiro was met with the scene of his family having been slaughtered. Everyone was dead except for his sister Nezuko. Absolutely devastated and racked with sadness, Tanjiro picked up his sister Nezuko, determined to get her medical aid. While on the journey, Nezuko began to wake up, and like a wild animal, she attacked her elder brother. It's with this unprompted violence that Tanjiro realized demons are actually real, and that Nezuko has transformed into one. The two siblings struggled as Tanjiro begged his sister to regain her humanity. Now hearing her brother's words, Nezuko eventually began to cry. Meanwhile, Gyu Tomioka would arrive. At first, Tanjiro tried to protect Nezuko from him. This prompted Gyu to ask why Tanjiro is protecting a demon. In Tanjiro fashion, he replied that the demon is still his little sister and she hasn't eaten any humans yet. The two continue to argue and have a cinematic fight until Gyu saw how protective Nezuko is of Tanjiro. Despite being a demon, Nezuko stands over her unconscious brother, ready to fight off Gyu. This strange phenomenon of unprompted compassion convinced Gyu to not slay her. Instead, he simply briefly knocked her out alongside her brother and gave Nezuko her iconic bamboo muzzle. Once Tanjiro woke up, Gyu instructed him to seek out Sakonji Urokodaki, a former Hashira and current trainer for swordsmen. And this interaction was very clearly a setup for Tanjiro's journey, but it is interesting to note that despite a demon destroying his family, Tanjiro has no ill will towards Nezuko. He merely wants his sister back. His compassion for her still bleeds through, regardless of the fact that she tried to kill him. And this is a reoccurring theme that we get to see more of throughout the story of this character. Tanjiro continues to be this foundation of compassion for those around him in spite of his past tragedies. This is more seen in the Nataguma mountain arc, but before that, let's focus on the 2 years worth of training Tanjiro endured. Tanjiro first meets Urokodaki while traveling to him. To reach Sagiri Mountain, Tanjiro needed to pass through a perilous mountainside. In spite of the danger presented, Tanjiro continued his journey until he came across a way station. Now this way station reeked of blood, which concerned Tanjiro enough to check it out. And inside, he found a demon feasting on deceased humans. Now, a scuffle would follow between the Kamado siblings and this demon. During this, Nezuko was able to behead the demon, however, no amount of physical damage seemed to truly harm it. At this point, Urokodaki appeared and informed Tanjiro that his knife would be too blunt to kill the demon. Tanjiro asked the man how to properly kill a demon, but was ignored. In the end, Tanjiro's kindness and overthinking caused the demon to perish by way of sunbeams. This death seemed to be rather painful and was something that seemed to stay with Tanjiro, especially as he confronts the spider family later on. That being said, Urokodaki did eventually begin to train Tanjiro. Now this training was grueling, mostly due to a combination of the hazardous traps Sakonji placed, along with the thin air on the mountain. While in Urokodaki's company, Tanjiro learned more of the mysterious Demon Slayer core. In order to become a swordsman, he needed to pass final selection held at Fujikasane Mountain. But after a year of this intense training, Urokodaki suddenly informed Tanjiro that he had nothing else to teach him. Instead, he needed to build upon what he had already learned and split a giant boulder in half with his sword. After half a year, Tanjiro had certainly improved but had yet to split the boulder. One day, while frustrated, a boy with a fox mask would suddenly appear. He introduced himself to be Sabito, and alongside him was a girl with a fox mask named Makamo. Now both Sabito and Makamo would train the young swordsman and teach him about total concentration breathing, a technique he would utilize throughout the rest of the series. And for another 6 months, Tanjiro would use what he learned from Makamo in order to practice with Sabito. Now it's important to note that from Makamo, Tanjiro learned how to hone his keen sense of smell in order to smell out an opening thread that linked his blade to his opponent. Yet each and every time, Sabito got the best of Tanjiro, at least until one day. Here they would both wield real swords. It was a basic premise, a faster blade would win, but for the first time, Tanjiro's sword reached Sabito and split open his mask. Right after this, both Sabito and Makamo faded away. And in place of Sabito's split mask was a gigantic boulder, now split. Seeing this, Urokodaki congratulated Tanjiro, but also admitted to him that he didn't want to send off another child to be killed. And later on, we would learn just how important that sentiment was. In preparation for final selection, Urokodaki would present to Tanjiro his very own fox mask, what was essentially like a graduation of sorts. Now once on Fujikasane Mountain, final selection would be explained. Demons hate wisteria, which grows up to a certain point. Afterwards, this wisteria-free area would be where their trial really began. Those in final selection must survive for 7 days atop a demon-infested mountain. And here, immediately, Tanjiro was attacked by 2 demons. Luckily, because of his training, Tanjiro was able to smell the opening thread and behead both of the demons in a single swing. Talk about progress. Regardless of being attacked, Tanjiro still prayed for the souls of the 2 demons. It's a quick scene, but it's very representative of a characteristic mentioned earlier: compassion, or better yet, empathy. And we'll see throughout his story that Tanjiro's empathy truly allows him to overcome the grim nature of these circumstances, something that plays heavily into the final arc. With that being said, while praying, he smells something rotten. He followed the scent and found a fellow would-be swordsman running. Chasing behind him was an enormous demon with many limbs. Tanjiro hesitates at first, but is able to act and save his fellow contestant. And in a bit of a twist, the demon would end up recognizing Tanjiro's mask, the demon revealing that it had killed 50 people in its lifetime, including 13 of Urokodaki's students. To add insult to injury, the demon recalled Sabito and Makamo by name. And it is through this line of dialogue that Tanjiro Tanjiro remembered that a demon's strength is proportionate to the number of humans it has eaten. And with this also comes along a realization for Tanjiro. His sense of smell has developed enough for him to detect the strength of a demon, which explains the rotten smell from before. The demon continued to taunt Tanjiro, describing how it killed both Sabito and Makomo. Clearly angry and unable to think properly, Tanjiro would charge the demon. However, he received a punch hard enough to send him into a nearby tree, knocking him unconscious. Once he regained consciousness, a cinematic battle would ensue between Tanjiro and the demon. Eventually, Tanjiro was able to gain the upper hand and defeat the creature. Truthfully, it's interesting to see how Tanjiro reacts to this demon's death. Regardless of being taunted and attacked, Tanjiro still manages to feel sorrow for the demon. He even goes as far as to hold its hand as it disintegrates. In the face of his circumstances and the fact that a demon destroyed his family, Tanjiro is able to combat his dark reality with a certain kindness we see again and again throughout the series. Now somehow, along with Kanao, Zenitsu, and Genya, Tanjiro survived the week. On the 7th day, Tanjiro learns more about the Demon Slayer Corps, from the ranking system to the uniforms. Tanjiro is also provided with a crow for communication purposes. Fun fact, Tanjiro's crow named itself Matsuemon Tennoji. It's very intelligent and has a very large ego. Anyway, Tanjiro descends the mountain while exhausted and distressed by being unable to ask a demon about a way to reverse Nezuko's condition. Eventually, he arrives at Orokodaki's residence where he is able to reunite with both Nezuko and his master. 15 days later, Tanjiro receives his Nichiren blade from Hotaru Haganezuka, who also explained the origins of Nichiren blade forging to him. Shortly after, Tanjiro was sent on his very first mission. Before he sets off, Orokodaki gifts Tanjiro with a custom box built for Nezuko. Thanking Orokodaki, Tanjiro heads off. His mission is relatively simple. Women have been disappearing at night and he is to deal with it. Once in town, Tanjiro speaks with a man whose fiancé was the most recent victim. Both parties decide to team up and look for the demon responsible. Sundown comes, which allows Tanjiro to finally sniff out the demon. Tanjiro races off toward the smell and he eventually comes to its source, yet finds nothing. He deduces that the demon must be underground along with a human woman. Through his unique sense of smell, Tanjiro is able to detect the demon's location despite being underground. He is able to stab the demon and retrieve the woman. Honestly, this fight just goes to show how insane Tanjiro's sense of smell really is. Even underground in a bit of a pocket dimension, Tanjiro still pinpoints the demon. It was mentioned earlier that Tanjiro doesn't begin as an extremely talented swordsman, which is true, but his sense of smell for demons really rounds out his perception. That being said, a lengthy fight begins between the two and ends with Tanjiro emerging victorious. During this, Tanjiro thinks back to something that Orokodaki told him. There is a demon out there who may be the key to restoring his sister's humanity, and that demon is Kimetsuji Muzan. Now, it's worth noting that Nezuko defends both Tanjiro and Kazumi, the man who lost his fiancée. And it's a really great scene because of how fiercely protective Nezuko is of not only Tanjiro, but all humans as well, making her quite the incredible partner for her brother when she needs to be. But now let's circle back to the demon lord himself, Muzan. Tanjiro's second mission sends him to Asakusa, Tokyo, which was most definitely a culture shock for Tanjiro being such a country boy. Finally, we see the beauty of the bustling early Taisho period. Bright lights surround Tanjiro as he tracks down a demon. However, he notices a familiar scent, one that thoroughly disturbs him. He follows the scent until he comes face to face with Muzan himself. Oddly enough, the king of demons is masking as a human man with a family. Regardless of this, Tanjiro is still determined to defeat the demon. Muzan escapes by transforming a man in the crowd into a demon, while Tanjiro deals with not only the local authority and a newly minted demon, Tamayo and Yushiro show up. Through her blood demon art, Tamayo was able to defuse the situation and bring Tanjiro to her camouflaged home. Tanjiro learns that both Tamayo and Yushiro share his goal, to eliminate Muzan. And from this chance encounter, Tamayo also agrees to help construct a cure by studying Nezuko's blood and the blood of demons closest to Muzan. Unfortunately, their meeting is cut short by the demons Susamaru and Yaiba, both of which claiming to be members of the 12 Kizuki. Keep in mind that the 12 Kizuki are the closest demons to Muzan. A battle would occur between the Kamado siblings and these two demons, and eventually these siblings won, but regrettably neither demon was actually a part of the 12 Kizuki. Tanjiro's next mission has the young Slayer head southeast. While on this journey, he again meets Zenitsu. and after a bit of banter, the timid slayer joins Tanjiro. Eventually, the pair come across an abandoned home. Outside are two siblings who claim their brother was taken into the house. Tanjiro and Zenitsu enter, but are separated. During this time, Tanjiro meets and spars with Inosuke Hashibita. After fighting other demons, Tanjiro is able to find the kidnapper, Kyogai, who was formerly a member of the 12 Kizuki, and so he did pose a bit of a challenge for Tanjiro. Kyogai's blood demon art certainly put Tanjiro at a disadvantage, as Iruma was able to change orientation. Ultimately, Tanjiro was able to behead the demon. However, yet again in a demon's final moments, Tanjiro humanizes Kyogai by complimenting his blood demon art. What was exceedingly genuine, as all throughout the fight he had done the very same, respect the man's art. Afterwards, Tanjiro and Inosuke get into an argument again, but they are able to set aside their differences and rest at a home with a Wisteria family crest. Here the trio get to know one another and learn why Tanjiro is traveling with a demon. After resting, the trio are officially on their first mission as a group. Their task? Eliminate a demon plaguing the Natagumo mountainside. Previously, I mentioned the significance of this arc, and that's because this is where Tanjiro's overflowing humanity and kindness for humans, or in this case demons, is really prevalent. Zenitsu, who is too afraid to climb the mountain, is left behind as Tanjiro and Inosuke press onwards. And here the pair come across a mountainside entwined with spider webs, and quickly enough they are faced with the mother of this spider clan. Despite an intense fight, Tanjiro is able to dispatch of the demon with a technique that makes her death painless. Regardless of the fact that he must defeat these demons, we see that Tanjiro still feels enough for them to allow for a non-suffering death. This philosophy of Tanjiro's will prove unique amongst his peers. The fight, however, does leave Inosuke injured. Both demon slayers are separated by the spider clan's father. Now alone, Tanjiro encounters Rui, the creator of this pseudo family. They engage in a fierce battle until Gyu, the water Hashira, arrives. During this fight, Tanjiro is able to use his family's Hinokami Kagura, but when it isn't enough, effortlessly Gyu saves the Kamado siblings. Afterwards, Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira, tries to kill Nezuko. Gyu defends them, allowing the siblings to escape, except both are caught by Shinobu's Suguko, Kanao. However, before the situation escalates any further, crows fly overhead and announce that Nezuko and Tanjiro are to be taken into custody. From there, Tanjiro is taken before the Hashira and put on trial. Meanwhile, the master and leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, Kaguya Ubuyashiki, would arrive. Here he asks the Hashira to pardon the Kamado siblings, explaining that a letter was sent to him from Urokodaki. The letter explains their situation, even stating that Gyu, Tanjiro, and Sakonji will commit seppuku if Nezuko harms a human. Unsatisfied but not wanting to go against their master's wishes, the Hashira excused Tanjiro and Nezuko. Following this, Shinobu brings Tanjiro and Nezuko to her mansion. Conveniently, Zenitsu and Inosuke are there as well. After some much needed rest, the trio begin to train under the watchful eyes of Aoi, Kanzaki, and Kanao. They struggle with training at first but are able to overcome this and also learn to master total breathing constant. During this time, Tanjiro learns of Shinobu's past. Her story is similar to Tanjiro's, as tragedy seems to paint a demon slayer's world. Yet unlike Tanjiro, she does not share his optimism and sees the world as bleak, believing demons cannot be reverted back to humans. Undeterred, Tanjiro continues to hold the belief that he can reverse Nezuko's demonic change. After some time, their training is complete, and the group head west to aid the Flame Hashira, Kyojuro, Rengoku. This section of Tanjiro's story starts with a trio buying tickets to the Mugen train. Tanjiro is eager to help the Flame Hashira, but also hopes Kyojuro has some intel on Hinokami Kagura. Once on the train, they find him. Kyojuro explains that he was tasked with eliminating the demon responsible for the disappearances on the train. Regrettably, Kyojuro has no information on Hinokami Kagura, however. Eventually, the trio, along with Kyojuro and everyone else on the train, fall into a deep slumber. We learn that Enmu is a demon causing this and is assigned to kill Tanjiro. Meanwhile, 4 civilians are commissioned to enter each of the Slayer's dreams. Each demon slayer has a unique and vivid dream. Tanjiro's dream, being reunited with his family. His dream isn't as wacky as Inosuke's nor as heartbreaking as Kyojiro's, but this simply goes to show how much Tanjiro yearns to go back to the way things were. The civilians were instructed to destroy each swordsman's spiritual core. During this, Tanjiro's dream leaves little hints. Not only does he see Nezuko's box, but he sees a version of himself in the Demon Slayer uniform, stating that he is in fact dreaming. And so even unconsciously, Tanjiro possesses such an incredible willpower, enough to subconsciously leave clues. Eventually, Nezuko gets up herself and helps out Tanjiro. Once awake, Tanjiro heads to the source of his sleep, the demon Enmu. Both demon and swordsman battle on the roof of the train. Continually, Tanjiro is put to sleep but manages to bring himself back to reality each time. Tanjiro is able to behead Enmu but learns that Enmu has fused with the train. Just in time, Inosuke arrives. Tanjiro instructs him to protect those on the train. Thankfully, Kyojuro also awakens now. He informs Tanjiro that he will protect 5 of the 8 cars, while Zenitsu and Nezuko defend the remaining 3. Meanwhile, Tanjiro and Inosuke will keep watch on the 3 cars as they search for the demon's weak spot. Inosuke is able to locate it and leads Tanjiro to the conductor's room. The pair try to slash through the neck of Enmu, but Tanjiro is stabbed by the desperate conductor. Undeterred, the Demon Slayers continue to attack in a collaborative effort. Eventually, the pair are able to behead Enmu. Of course, this causes the train to crash. From there, victory is felt until Upper Rank 3 Akaza appears. Akaza engages in a fight with Kyojuro that Tanjiro immediately recognizes to be well beyond his depth, which ultimately does end in Kyojuro's death. However, the pair fight long enough for the sun to rise. Obviously, Akaza retreats, but now angry, a still injured Tanjiro would throw his sword at the demon, impaling him and calling him a coward. This display by Tanjiro shows a more intense, perhaps even dark side to his usually radiant nature. Kyojuro's death is the first time Tanjiro sees a fellow demon slayer die. That being said, the trio end up yet again at Shinobu's mansion to recover. In lieu of recovering, Tanjiro heads to the Rengoku residence. Not only is his goal to learn more about his family's dance, but to pass on a message Kyojuro gave him. Once there, he meets Senjuro. But the two don't speak very much because Kyojuro's father, Shinjuro, arrives and begins to berate his deceased son. And Tanjiro is absolutely flabbergasted by this. At first, he asks Shinjuro not to speak ill of Kyojuro. However, Shinjuro continues until he notices the earrings Tanjiro wears. He comments that Tanjiro must be one who practices sun breathing. Tanjiro and Shinjuro have a small physical altercation that also reveals some key information. Sun breathing is the very first and progenitive breathing form that all breath styles originate from. It is the most powerful breath style in existence, and additionally, Hinokami Kagura is sun breathing. This news seems to only distress Tanjiro further as he thinks back to being unable to protect Kyojuro. However, one could argue that it is a feat in of itself to manage to protect 200 people aboard a train. But after this disagreement, Tanjiro receives the record of the 21st Flame HASHIRA from Senjuro. But to add insult to injury, the pages of this historical document are destroyed, most likely by Shinjuro. Nevertheless, Tanjiro vows to get stronger and train harder. He shares a heartfelt conversation with Senjuro. The latter gives him Kyojuro's sword hilt, something that Tanjiro would later add to his sword until the very end. Afterwards, Tanjiro heads back to Shinobu's residence to begin yet another training session. Eventually, he returns to good enough health to begin working again. One day after coming back from a mission, Tanjiro finds the Sound HASHIRA, Tengen Uzui, attempting to cart off 2 girls from the mansion. One of them is Aoi, who previously told Tanjiro of her fear of fulfilling Demon Slayer duties. Thankfully, Tanjiro is able to convince Tengen to take him, Zenitsu, and Inosuke along on his mission to the entertainment district. From there, we learn that not only must these swordsmen masquerade as women, but they are on the lookout for Tengen's wives who have gone quiet. Now disguised, each Demon Slayer is dropped off at a different brothel. Once there, Tanjiro learns that a recent courtesan, Suma, ran off with a customer. He questions another worker, Koinatsu, who reveals that she doesn't believe Suma ran away at all. However, she is unable to provide any more information beyond that. After investigating, Tanjiro and Inosuke wait for Tengen and Zenitsu to arrive. But Zenitsu does not show up. Instead, Tengen comes and explains that Zenitsu will not be joining them. He also notes that he may have put the young swordsman in danger and instructs them to leave. Tanjiro tries to argue against this, but Tengen leaves as quickly as he appeared. Afterwards, Tanjiro explains his plan to finish investigating and believes not only is Zenitsu alive, but so are Tengen's 3 wives. Now, during his time at the brothel, Tanjiro, who went by Sumiko, was an incredibly helpful person, just like how he was back home and with the neighboring town. Albeit now, on account of his Demon Slayer physique, he may have been a bit too efficient. But before leaving, Tanjiro visits Koinatsu to say his goodbyes. Regrettably, once he does leave, Koinatsu comes face to face with the second half of the upper rank 6 demon. Tanjiro is able to sense the smell of a demon and discovers Daki. He yells at Daki to release the now bound Koinatsu. The latter refuses and throws him from the building. Regardless of now being dazed, Tanjiro regains his composure. He notices a strap on Nezuko's box is now broken and informs her to stay put unless her life is in danger. With a slash, Tanjiro is able to free Koinatsu. Both Demon and Demon Slayer continue to fight, which chips Tanjiro's blade. In order to stay in the battle, Tanjiro utilizes sun breathing and water breathing. Here we have Tanjiro's belief in the sanctity of life on full display, right alongside his fury, as blood began to pool from his eyes. Now being so utterly fixated on the punishment of this demonic scourge, Tanjiro went as far as to forget to breathe. Upon doing so, Tanjiro loses the advantage and is made vulnerable to Daki until Nezuko appears to back him up. She is able to keep Daki at bay long enough for Tengen to arrive. Here Daki is beheaded but does not die. Instead, her brother Gyutaro emerges from her body. Tanjiro gets a rampaging Nezuko under control and then rejoins Tengen. Now alongside him, Zenitsu and Inosuke, they continue to fight the demonic siblings. Eventually the trio are able to decapitate both Daki and Gyutaro. This arc is significant not only because Tanjiro takes on another moon-ranked demon, well, demons, but for the parallel between the demon siblings and the Kamado siblings. Gyutaro's only goal was to protect his sister, something he shares with Tanjiro. Despite this, both siblings are led down a dark path, a path opposite of Tanjiro and Nezuko's. A path that the Kamado siblings could have very well gone down as well, had Tanjiro arrived home any sooner. In fact, their familial bond almost mirrors Tanjiro's relationship with Nezuko, even extending into the afterlife as Gyutaro heads into hell with Daki on his back. Now obviously next for Tanjiro is a recovery period during which he dreams of his ancestor. His ancestor Sumiyoshi is seen having tea with a mysterious long-haired man. The stranger mentions that he'll leave soon, which prompts Sumiyoshi to rebuff this, saying that he owes the man his life. However, the stranger mentions that he isn't the special man Sumiyoshi thinks him to be, that he is a man of no worth because he was unable to protect what was most important to him. After this bizarre dream, Tanjiro wakes up to a relieved Kanao. She explains that he was in a coma for 2 months. Tanjiro asks how everyone else is doing, and at this point he learns that besides Inosuke, everyone including Tengen has recovered. A week passes and Tanjiro fully heals. However, his sword is chipped, which leads the young slayer to search for Hotaru, who was in the swordsmith village. Through a mysterious journey, Tanjiro eventually arrives at the village. Immediately he notices the scent of a hot spring, and looking back, this seems to have been a reference to the HASHIRA featured during this storyline. After arriving, Tanjiro meets with the chief of the village, and the chief reveals that Hotaru has gone missing. Then he brings Tanjiro to their local hot spring to heal. While there, Tanjiro meets Genya Shinazugawa and the love HASHIRA Mitsuri Kanroji. Afterwards, Tanjiro wanders the forest. There he sees another HASHIRA, Muichiro Tokito, the missed HASHIRA, who is seen arguing with a child. Their argument appears to be over a key. Seeing Muichiro hit the child, Tanjiro intervenes, and he is subsequently knocked out by Muichiro. Now after awakening moments later, the child would explain to Tanjiro that he gave Muichiro the key. He also states that the key is used to activate a doll, the doll dubbed Yorichi Type 0. And it is used to train swordsmen. Meanwhile, Muichiro uses Yorichi Type 0 and breaks one of its 6 arms. After consoling the child who is named Kotetsu, Tanjiro decides to train with the doll as well. Once again, we get to see Tanjiro train to improve his skills, and that is something that I really enjoy about this series. Eventually, Tanjiro accidentally cuts off Yorichi Type 0's head, and underneath is a 300-year-old sword. The sword is rusted due to a lack of use. It was, after all, inside Yorichi Type 0 for an undetermined amount of time. Conveniently, Hotaru would arrive. With this, he says that he will work on the sword and that it will be Tanjiro's. Elsewhere, upper rank 5 Gyokko and upper rank 4 Hantengu show up to wreak havoc. Meanwhile, Tanjiro speaks with Muichiro. During this, Hantengu sneaks in but is recognized to be a demon. Hantengu was able to dodge Muichiro's attack and would climb to the ceiling. Pitifully, he begs the slayers not to hurt him, but Muichiro would manage to behead him. And from there, the upper rank demon would split into 2 instead of simply dying. Both swordsmen are then separated. Tanjiro and Nezuko are left to fight the 2 demons. However, one of the clones, Sekiro, emits lightning. It hits Tanjiro, but before he falls unconscious, he sees Genya on a rooftop. Tanjiro awakens and warns Genya that his attacks were useless against the demons, as beheading it only seemed to sprout more clones. A lengthy battle would happen as multiple clones would fight Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Genya. Now Tanjiro would experience yet another memory from his ancestor. The inherited memory draws a parallel between a swordsman with Hanafuda earrings and Tanjiro. Both had black swords that turned red during combat. At this point, 4 demons spawned and were swiftly defeated. However, Tanjiro would smell a 5th body. Tanjiro directs Genya to the 5th demon as he fends off its clones. Genya is unable to behead the demon and instead entrusts Tanjiro to do so. Alarmingly, a 6th demon would show up, this demon revealing itself to be a transformed Sekiro, and their fight would continue until Mitsuri would arrive. Here she protects the trio while they look for Hantengu's real body. Hantengu escapes and a furious Tanjiro shouts that he'll make the demon pay for every sin he committed. Once more we see the anger that resides within Tanjiro. He beheads Hantengu, but this is the wrong body. Eventually sunlight would begin to break, forcing Tanjiro to decide between saving his sister or slaying Hantengu. But before he can make this difficult choice for himself, Nezuko would do it for him, launching him elsewhere. And ultimately Tanjiro would manage to defeat Hantengu. However, now knowing his last remaining family member, his sister Nezuko, to have been destroyed by the sun, Tanjiro would collapse to the ground due to exhaustion and unending grief. However, this grief would come to an end as remarkably, Nezuko stood unharmed and spoke to Tanjiro. She had miraculously overcome the sun. Because of his injuries, Tanjiro rests for 7 days, and afterwards he would engage in Hashira training, something that is meant to strengthen the swordsman due to a lack of demon activity. During this, Tanjiro also shares a conversation with Gyu, who is convinced by Tanjiro to participate in Hashira training as well. Now, interestingly enough, Gyu at this time would admit his disappointment with Tanjiro for taking up sun breathing, as he always desired for him to eventually take up the mantle of the water Hashira. And if you're curious to know more about that, we have gone further in depth with all of this in previous videos, so be sure to check those out. One focuses specifically on this moment between the two, and the other is the entire life of Gyu Tomioka. But anyways, this is a short arc that serves as a stepping stone for one of the last major plot lines for Tanjiro, leading us to some of his most important moments in the series. On account of an urgent summons, Tanjiro and Gyu rush the Ubuyashiki home. The estate explodes and reveals a burnt Muzan beginning to regenerate. Along with the other Hashira, Tanjiro attacks Muzan, but is dropped into Nakame's Infinity Castle. Both Tanjiro and Gyu face off against and are able to defeat Akaza. This fight allows Tanjiro to again view the see-through world. Then suddenly Tanjiro and Gyu collapse from their wounds and exhaustion. Tanjiro awakens to Gyu cauterizing his wounds. Meanwhile, new information will come from the crows as Tanjiro realizes that they are getting closer to Muzan. And with this, Tanjiro also learns about the deaths of some of his comrades such as Muichiro and Genya. Regardless, Tanjiro pushed forward, determined to defeat Muzan. Eventually, along with Gyu, he comes face to face with Kibutsuji himself. Many emotions flow into him at the sight of Muzan here, and Gyu notices and tells Tanjiro to calm down. Muzan seems to take advantage of Tanjiro's momentary anger and compares himself to a natural disaster. And to this, with a silent rage, Tanjiro replies, Muzan is a being that should not be allowed to exist. And this is truly the very first time Tanjiro feels such a raw, intense rage directed towards another being. This is hatred. Ultimately, he decides to stall Muzan and obtain any information that he can. Muzan fights with the pair, and Tanjiro loses an eye, but continues to fight the Demon Lord. Mitsuri and Obanai arrive and provide support, Obanai even suggesting that Tanjiro should retreat. Their fight then erupts outside as the castle is destroyed. Tanjiro is poisoned as well as presumed to be dead. Thankfully, Tanjiro is not dead and is instead in a coma-like state from the poison. During this time, he experiences more memories from his ancestor. These visions reveal the 13th form of sun breathing, demonstrated by Yorichi, the mysterious long-haired stranger from before. Tanjiro is amazingly raised into consciousness by an antidote. He rejoins the fight now with a massive tumor on his face. Tanjiro formulates a plan to use the 13th form, which would allow him to continuously attack Muzan's vital points until sunrise. Tanjiro's attacks here remind Muzan of Yorichi, which only fuels his anger that much more. Muzan keeps Tanjiro from completing all the forms, but eventually he is able to finally connect the forms. Their battle goes on until Obanai arrives. Both slayers take on Muzan, but Tanjiro begins to feel weak. Regardless, Tanjiro continues to fight. Muzan later unleashes a massive shockwave that not only injures Tanjiro, but knocks back any demon slayer within the vicinity. Right after, both Inosuke and Zenitsu arrive to help Tanjiro and stall Muzan. With their help, a heavily wounded Tanjiro stays in the fight. In fact, every character does their damnedest to protect Tanjiro. For example, Obanai takes on a vicious blow on his behalf. Later on, Muzan sends out another shockwave which obliterates Tanjiro's arm. However, Gyu is able to lend a hand. Dawn breaks, but Muzan is still desperate not to die. Oddly enough, he turns into a giant baby, his flesh perpetually growing until it swallows Tanjiro whole. And really, it is some literary justice to see Muzan, this great powerful demon, reduced to a wailing, massive baby. But now from inside, Tanjiro continues to attack Muzan, forcing him into the sunlight where he evaporates. The news of Muzan's defeat leads to a pseudo-celebration around the Demon Slayer core until Gyu finds Tanjiro collapsed but still holding his sword. And now, due to his blood loss, Gyu is informed that Tanjiro was not breathing, nor did he have a pulse. Gyu would hold Tanjiro's hand, all the while apologizing miserably for being unable to protect him. Again, it's a delight to see the emotion other characters bring forth because of Tanjiro. Gyu, a typically stoic character, cries during the scene. Yet suddenly, Tanjiro's tumor would shrink as Muzan's blood would begin to take hold. Tanjiro was then able to regenerate his arm. He was now a demon who would overcome the sun. And as a newborn demon, Tanjiro proves to be as strong as Muzan, if not more so, despite being so feral. Muzan had chosen Tanjiro to be his successor, the one true king of the demons who would be able to wreak havoc regardless of the time of day. And with this staggering power, Tanjiro would overwhelm his friends and comrades. However, despite causing his now human sister Nezuko to bleed, Demon King Tanjiro did not consume her. However, to revert Tanjiro back to being a human, Kanao uses the final form of flower breathing, allowing her to inject Tanjiro with wisteria-based medicine created by the late Shinobu, a character who, like we said, previously had no hope when it came to the reversion of demons, but has certainly changed quite a lot since knowing the Kamado siblings. Internally, Tanjiro was bound by the will of Muzan, who would continue to spin him lies in an effort to have him resist his humanity. And Tanjiro, for the most part, is able to see right through all of this deception. However, when Muzan begins to prey upon Tanjiro's survivor's guilt, the young boy does in fact seem to waver a bit as he is brought to tears. However, Tanjiro was not alone, as the spirits of all those who had believed in him, particularly the now departed Hashira, would live up to their name as pillars and raise Tanjiro up towards those who were still alive and still loved him, allowing him to break free from Muzan's hold and become human once more. After a time skip of 3 months, Tanjiro wakes up but has lost function in his left arm and right eye. And that's because he lost them prior to becoming a demon in the first place. And with this, our various cast members would joyously reunite with Tanjiro and the others. Afterwards, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Nezuko, and Inosuke headed back to Tanjiro's old home. Once there, we'd see some slice of life-esque panels of the trio as they live out their lives. There is, however, one last time skip. In the future, Sumihiko Kamado, Tanjiro's descendant, wakes up late for school. Now rushing there on his way, there are many references to other characters and their descendants and or reincarnations. Sumihiko's older brother Kanata is also Tanjiro's descendant, a boy who more so favors the visage of Tanjiro's eventual wife, Kanao, visually. When they were much smaller, their grandmother used to tell them stories of the past, stories of their demon-slaying ancestors, stories that Sumiko wholeheartedly believed in, as he would pray for the salvation of the demon souls just like Tanjiro did. However, Kanata considered these tales to be works of fiction, despite being moved by them all the same. After their grandmother's passing, Sumihiko would fondly remember her just as Tanjiro remembered his own grandmother. Now, this part is admittedly pretty weird to me, but it seems as though Tanjiro's descendant Kanata and Nezuko's descendant Toko are dating. It would at this point have been about 100 years since the time of Tanjiro, as the story of Demon Slayer takes place during the Taisho period, dating between 1912 and 1926. So if these two were to trace their lineage back to just their great-great-grandparents, there would be a link, making this bit oddly incestuous. But getting back to Sumihiko, whose name you may notice is very close to Tanjiro's female name, Sumiko, is joined by his best friend Tojiro, who is Senjiro Rengoku's descendant. Both boys continue to run to school until they make it just in time, somersaulting over a locked gate. The symbolism between both Tanjiro and Senjiro's descendants somehow feels really satisfying. We even end on a good note, as the final panel is a group photo of the cast framed with Tanjiro's Hanafuda earrings. And that, my friends, is the story of Tanjiro Kamado, a boy who has overcome his circumstances through willpower and compassion. Truly a remarkable protagonist for this incredible story that we all enjoy. And if you'd like to enjoy more in-depth Demon Slayer content like this, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best Demon Slayer content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.